Tales, sponsored by Hardrow.
Welcome to another episode of Top Lines and Tales, the nation's favourite livestock podcast. And as always, we'd like to thank our sponsors, Hardrow, for their continued support. This week on Top Lines and Tales, I've got a guest I haven't met before, but we've had a few chats over the while. Andrew Keiley. Andrew, welcome to Top Lines and Tales. Thank
you, Andy. Thank you for having me on your podcast.
And Andrew, yours is a story of hope and achievement, I think, and possibly inspiration as well. I think a man with a story to tell, and just give us an idea of where you started and where you are now, and then we'll fill in the gaps as we go along.
Yeah, I was born in Rochdale in 1979, East Lancashire, and very much an urban childhood. Although there was a farm in the family, it was sort of it skipped a generation. So my father wasn't a farmer, and my grandfather wasn't a farmer, but his brothers were. And the farm was sort of on the urban fringe, and it was a place when we were kids to go and spend a weekend. When we were old enough to be left on our own, that's where you would find us. So it was a big part of our lives. Both me and my brother. My brother's 7 years older than me, David. Mm-hmm. We grew up basically having the farm as the go-to point, to get out of the hustle and the bustle and of the terraced mill town environment.
Where were you? Where were you at in the city, in town?
It was Rochdale, so it would be called Greater Manchester now. It would be about 20 minutes out of Manchester. Surrounded by the Pennines, really, the East Lancashire Pennines. We weren't that far away from the West Yorkshire, the border. We'd be maybe 7 miles away from that. Upland, very much harsh upland environment surrounding the town. A lot of water catchment, a lot of reservoirs, and moorland. Quite high as well. Yeah.
But that's where you were, where your grandfather was. Just give us a little bit of an idea of where you are now, and then I said we'll fill in the gaps, really.
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah. So I'm in Hawes now, or in a little village just north of Hawes called Hardrow, with my partner Hannah. We farm here. It's a partnership, really. It's Hannah and myself, and my father-in-law, who's sort of is retired, but he still plays a part in the day-to-day goings on. He likes to be involved, and he's helped us get set up, really. And I've been with Hannah 12 years now.
Excellent. Yeah. That's a great thing. As I said, you've gone from the living in the town there to owning your own farm. We'll go into that in a minute. Let's just go back to, you said your grandfather's brother there. Tell us a little bit about what they were doing back then when you were going into the farm as a kid.
Yeah, they did. My family, the Keiley family, originated from Ireland. My great grandfather came over in the 1920s. He was a policeman, but for one reason or another, he had to leave Ireland and wanted somewhere to bring his family to. The family back in Ireland, the Keileys and the Rowlands, were both connected with farming.
We're talking 1920s troubles times?
Yes, yeah. My great grandfather worked he was a sergeant in the Royal Irish Constabulary, and there was a bit of a skirmish, I think, and quite a few of his colleagues were killed, and I think they said, you better get out of here quick, we'll get you out, and they disbanded him. And he looked around a few places when he came to England in 1922. Preston, I think, in Lancashire was the first place he landed to, and then he settled in Rotherham for a short spell. And then in those days, hill farming was tough, and I think a lot of these waterboard farms around these places, they couldn't get tenants. They couldn't let these farms, and it was an obvious place for him to go that was out of the way, really. And he took this farm in Whitworth called Withins.
Would he be in hiding? I mean, I'm putting words in here. I don't want to stir up any troubles there.
I've always been told since we were kids that when I said, "Why on earth would you want to come here?" It was the most remote farm, and he said he wanted to be where he could see people coming. So, that's yeah. For maybe for a good long while, he would always be, trying to be careful.
Looking over his shoulder, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So and then he took the farm on there, the rented farm up there on the hill, a bit of land, bit of stock with it. What was it?
Yeah, it was moorland. There'd been a lot of moor rights. There wasn't much mowing ground, but with it being water catchment to the Rochdale and other places, it was really on the right next to a reservoir. And when they set the water corporation up, it was all Victorian infrastructure and all these very ornate stone drains and little pumping stations and things like that. And I think the fact they wanted to move the farming enterprise away from all this, so they gave him chance of another farm further up or further back out of the way, called Meadows, which he took, and there was a reasonable house there. The first farm we came to now is a ruin. It's just a pile of stones. And then just before the Second World War, he got chance of a better farm called Fold Head, and moved to there with obviously his children had been growing. There was 8 children. They stayed in Ireland for 6 months with his wife until he could, be assured of them getting somewhere comfortable to stay. There's, so on these 2 or 3 hard farms, he brought up his family, and they got a chance to move to Fold Head, which was a better farm. There was a lot better, mowing ground and better pastures and a decent house, and that's they moved there just before the Second World War, and they finished up buying it in the early 1950s.
Okay. Back then, there were opportunities to do things like that, weren't there? I mean, especially those farms there, you could buy them for, I wouldn't say for next to nothing, but compared to what they were.
I think it was £2,000 they paid for it, but it was a big farm. It gradually, as when we were growing up, he'd let bits of land go, which was a shame. Just because they were getting older, and there was nobody really, apart from me and my brother, that were really mad keen. Perhaps we had an uncle as well, my dad's eldest brother, that spent a lot of time helping them. But you know what families are like. For one reason or another, it does not. You think you might get a chance to take on these things, and it doesn't materialise. There was a lot of people involved. It was a big family, and it would have been nice to have a crack at taking it when it did get sold when I was 17. But before then, they were running Hillsuckler cows, a lot of black Galloways, and white-bred shorthorn bull. So we were producing blue greys. There'd be a few belties, and then I think in the late 70s, early 80s, he bought a Charolais bull to go on these Galloway cows, and as a lot of them did, to try and get better stores.
Sure. And that would be your great grandfather still farming that then, or would be one of his sons, but not your father?
No, it was my grandfather's brother Bill at this point in time. Yeah, okay. And he had an elder brother called Paddy. He was the eldest of all the 8. It was a real shepherd. He was the one with the sort of the drive to build sheep numbers up, and we ran quite a big flock of Derbyshire Gritstons. There'd be a few lonks as well, but they were mainly Gritstons that I can remember, and that they finished up being one of the top flocks. They were a very popular breed back in those days. I can remember going to draft youth sales as a boy, and there'd be a lot of sheep, from Derbyshire as well as Lancashire, East. It was. It's a shame how they've turned into a minority breed, like a lot of these have. They just didn't. They weren't right.
No, but you're right. But both the Gritstone and the Locks have been on the rare breed list. I think they're back out of it now. A lot of these breeds are coming back out now, and we're thankful to the people that have preserved these breeds and kept them going there. But just going back to that, so your grandfather's brother's farming it. It gets to the 90s. Your father doesn't want to take it on. It's not an opportunity for you, and it goes on the market.
That's pretty much it. I mean, my father would have helped us. I mean, my dad was an engineer. He'd worked hard all his life to provide for us, and he'd gone to night school when we were boys and got qualified as an engineer, and he finished up managing a big mental hospital, as it was, a Prestwich hospital in the just on the outskirts of Manchester, and he was made, his boiler. It was all coal fired, so they had a big mill chimney that Fred Dibner used to come and fix.
Okay.
My dad was a good pal with him, when he, in his working life, and. Dad, he knew we were keen, and he would have helped us. We had actually made the family an offer, and it wasn't what they wanted. So Dad says, "Well, I'm not falling out," and it wasn't worth it. So Dad said to us there'd be other opportunities come along, and I think. Having a farm in your family, it's very special. It's you get this buzz of being there, and all I used to do when I sat in school was daydream about what I'd been doing over the weekend and what I was going to do the next weekend, and I could smell silage on my hands on a Monday morning and things like that, and it was like an escape. It's all I ever wanted to do was be a farmer, right from being a small boy, So
and then 17 years old, farm get sold there. A dream, I suppose. Yeah. Hey, we like these sort of things. Starting again from scratch, the sort of stories I like to hear on Top Lines and Tales here. But I mean, at 17 years old, in your head, your brother a bit older, that you are going to go and be a farmer, and then set out on a route. Did you have some kind of route plan, or did you go to college to learn, or where did you go from there?
I was doing A levels, and I didn't really make it. I got quite depressed actually after the sale of the farm. I was in a bit of a trough for quite a few years, and my brother, he just graduated from Aberdeen University with an agricultural degree, and he wanted to be a dairy consultant, so he sort of moved into that direction, and was a farm manager for Grampian Pigs actually up in Banff for several years just to get his house in order, and so he'd sort of forged his own path. But he did finish up owning land and, setting up a Belty herd with his daughters. And so he did finish up achieving his goals to the best of his ability. But, I mean, he's very keen on dairy cattle, and he's a consultant for Kite now. He has been for the last 10 years, and he's on good money, and he's dealing with some very big, high-powered herds. And
Yeah. And yourself then, you went into what, farm management? Is it? No, did you go to college? I mean, how did it go, Andrew?
I went to Hardrow. I did a HND. I had 2 years in college, and then I had a sandwich year. And we had a Limousin bull actually. I forgot to mention when a Limousin bull landed to full dead when I was about 10 or 11, I think, in it, and that replaced the Charolais, and I fell in love with this bull. He was a really quiet, great-natured bull. He was called Dynamite. I've got his pedigree somewhere, but he was I used to lead him about on a tether, and I wasn't much older than 10 or 11, and I would take him out to grass before he went up to serve the cows and things like. And I just developed an interest in the Limousins, and that was what my goal was. If I ever did take the farm, was to put, to expand that kind of thing. But it's never left me. I always said I would get some at some point. But yeah, I went. I did a placement for a family called the Watchorn family in Rutland in Whissendine. I worked there for 6 months as a stockman and doing a bit of arable work for Jeff Watchorn. Was a really nice chap, and his son Anthony. They were heavily involved in the Limousins. They'd imported a lot of cattle, and they had co-ownership of a bull called Oakley Oscar, which was quite a renowned sire back in those days.
He was,
yeah. And he. Yeah, with a lot of nice calves, and it was a big operation. Interesting. So I did 6 months there, and lovely village, great people. But I was getting a bit homesick. I wanted to get back to the north, and Myerscough College in Preston. I'd been talking to them, and they hired me as a shepherd and a stockman
Okay.
for the remainder of my sandwich year, and then they offered me a job after that, so I worked for them for 3 years.
Okay. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And a good outfit, good college too.
yeah, very good.
Yeah.
Yeah, did an expanding dairy herd. They milked 300, I think, when I left. Very good, very good grassland on the field. Very early growing. A lot of rain, but it was very productive land, and sort of the sheep. I was in charge of the sheep operation, 800 ewes, sort of fitting the gaps really, and I did quite a lot of the tractor driving and things, and young stock rearing, and so I'd got enough skill about me to be able to think, well, I'm ready for the next move, and I started to apply for farms and things like that. But I think we put in for over a dozen tenancies. Various descriptions, and I didn't start to get any luck with getting further in the tenancy world or get shortlisted until I was a bit older, and I'd got a bit of money behind me.
So
but even then,
what did you do then? In the meantime, obviously you still needed money.
Yeah, I got the college had a bit of a restructuring, and they gave up the farm that I was. All this land belonged to the Queen. It was Duchy of Lancaster land, and they had to give the hill farm up in order to take a farm that was next door to the main unit to expand the dairy herd. And I was a bit sad about that. I thought, well, I love it up here, and I actually got chance of redundancy, a small redundancy, which I immediately went and bought some sheep with. And the guy that took the hill farm over, John Alp and Michael Alp, the Alp family from up in the Forest of Bowland, he said, well, I'll take you on for 3 or 4 days a week, and you can work with us. And that gave me a bit of spare time to try and find some land, and I did. I'd got pockets of land anyway that I'd sort of been fiddling about with, and the first sheep I bought was some blue-faced Leicesters, some crossing Leicesters. I went to Skipton and bought 5 ewes and a tup, and a handful of Swaledales after that to breed mules. And that was I'd always liked the mules. I'd worked with them at college, and they were really nice, easy sheep to work with. They weren't any difficulty at lambing really, as long as you were on top of things, they were. And I thought, well, I'll try and breed some of these, and I finished up, getting connected with Hawes through that, and the people that I'd met really.
Sure.
I got a shepherd's job in Wensleydale. Obviously, I'd rented. I had 300 sheep of my own. I'd about 200 acres rented in 2 or 3 different places. Okay. And the money wasn't rolling in. They'd done away with the sheep annual premium, which was my rent payer. I could get my ewe check and pay the rent. And so I thought, well, I'm going to have to get a job here. I was doing all sorts of things, milking at nights, and just to get some extra money to come in to make sure my rent was paid. And it was quite hard times, really. I was going looking for cheap chickens in the co-op at closing time, to just try and spin the money out as far as it would go.
And that's something, I just stop you there for a second. That's something that I don't think anybody should be ashamed of. I mean, I've been in that situation myself where you reach a low end and making ends meet, you've just really got to scrape the barrel to get going. But I think they call it character building nowadays. Well, that's what stands you in good stead. When you go further forward in life, you're not frightened to take the risks, because what's the worst can happen? You can go back to that area, and it doesn't kill you, makes you stronger, sort of thing. So did you find that? Look back at that and think the same thing?
Definitely, and I also, my mum and dad also said, look, if you need a meal, come home. So I would always, I'd land back at some point in the month, and just have a couple of days and get restocked and take some food back with me and stuff like that, because I lived in a caravan.
Okay.
And but I got chance of a shepherd's job with a house for the Spenceley family down near Laban, and he was Richard Spenceley, was very instrumental in the Swaledale Sheep Breeders Association. He finished up when they offered me the job, because I had some good dogs. The first dog I ever got was a really good dog, and I had some daughters of his as well, and I was able to gather, competently, and I'd got a good team of dogs anyway. I'd sort of built them up.
Sure.
It was an interest of mine, and then it was a dream come true, really. I was managing a big flock of Swaledales on a moor and breeding. I was in charge of the mule gimmer operation. There was 500 crossed ewes, and the rest were pures. There was over 1,000 ewes, and to be the bonus to it was, he said, look, we know you're keen on Swaledales. He said you can fetch, sort of 50 of your best ewes with you, and because I'd started breeding pure Swaledales before then and started showing, and which was great, and he said, we'll tup them for you. You can put, and it was sort of a good stepping stone, and I learned a lot about the sheep, and I learned a lot about the environment that they belong in, these fells are so special, and these hoofed, hefted flocks of sheep are a dream when you're working with them, and it's great to see it all. I mean, it's disappeared virtually. There are several still stalwart flocks that are still around here, and but not in any great number like it used to be.
Well, we'll go into the swales in a second, because I know you're still involved with them. And as you said, you went into a caretaker's job, met your partner, and there's a big step coming up here.
There is, yeah. The caretaker's job was, I'd done 5 years in for the Spenceleys, and the caretaker's job for the Helvellyn mountain range and the farm manager's job really came up, and I'd already met Hannah through the sheepdogs. Her dad was a sheepdog trials, and I'd been going to sheepdog trials, and I knew we were friends, and I'd based myself back in the lakes, and everything was going great. And
Helvellyn, I'm right in thinking, I mean, that mountain range is climbing country up there in the Lake District, isn't it? I mean, it's a pretty hard land up there.
Absolutely. I mean, it was, when I first went up to the farm to have an interview, it was like going into the Alps. I've never been in such a beautiful valley, all self-contained. I had no neighbours. It was a dream of a place, but I soon learned. I learned going into it. I thought, I had 800 Swaledale ewes to try and improve, and a pedigree herd of Simmentals, and they were really nice cows. And I thought, this is a good opportunity to put my stamp on this and improve everything. And it would be 2012 I got the job. We expanded. We lifted the stamp of sheep up. I was trying to buy the best tups I could, and the money was good. I had a good salary, and I was able to save. For the first time in my life, I was able to save and put money in the bank, and I was the temptation was there to buy an expensive tup, which I did occasionally, but I didn't blow the bank. I just, I could improve things quietly, because I still had my nucleus flock of sheep.
Sure, yeah. I mean, that's great. Again, youngsters listen to this. We'll maybe talk a little bit at the end as to how, but to work your way through the hard times, and eventually with the knowledge that you've gained there, I mean, you wouldn't just be given a job like that if you weren't able to do it. So the knowledge that you gain there to get into a job like that all of a sudden you're in a position now where you can start saving for your real dream.
Yeah, that was it. And the paperwork side of things, it was difficult, because it was such a big farm. The list of jobs was endless, and I had a sort of an office clerk. The family that owned the farm were like into banking and stockbrokers and insurance, and they were very wealthy, and they had there was always staff around to help me with doing the accounts and things, as long as my bookkeeping was reasonable. But they knew I was more of a practical manager rather than an office man. I hated meetings, and but our son was born while I was still there, and Hannah wanted to get back to work after 6 months, and my mum and dad came down to stay with me, and Patrick was a little boy. It was nice to have him with me while I was farming. He would come round in the tractor, or I've even been lambing sheep with him in the pram in the field. He's been involved since day one. In dreadful weather. But we had a good skin on the pram, and I would be going lambing sheep and taking him round, and it was great to have that experience.
Don't worry, social services don't listen to this program. You're all right.
No, they'll be right, don't worry. That's great. The biggest thing with the Lake District was the weather. we had Storm Desmond just as things were we'd really got things singing, and that decimated the place. You know, I did a video with the Farmers Weekly about it, whether it's still on the internet or not. But they came to see the damage that was caused, and it was like you'd never seen anything like it. The landslides and gravel and debris, and the road up to the farm was sort of part undermined, so that really there was only half a road hanging on by the skin of its teeth, and I thought, oh no, this is no good at all. You know, it was the only way in to get stuff in, and they came and did a sort of temporary fix on that as best they could. But there was so much damage everywhere in the area that it was a case of prioritising things.
Sure,
you know,
sure. Heartbreaking when you've got all that up together, and then the weather can do that to you. But that's farming, isn't it? I mean, that happens and still happens.
Oh, it does. Yeah, I mean, we'd had 12 inches of rain in an hour, a couple of hours. It was unbelievable. And the rain was bad enough anyway, any time of year, but to get it like that, and then it caused all the lambing fields in the valley. I had to leave them clean for bringing, because we had to winter sheep away at the finish. We didn't winter any on the fell, so I had a big wintering bill, and I had a lot of sheep coming home in one go, and to come home to all that, and we were lambing in the fields. It was very much a dog and stick operation. You know, there was you'd go and lamb a pair of twins, or you'd go and put a mark on them and push them through into another field, and you sort of drift lamb, if you will, and you'd be walking singles out onto the allotment and things like that, and you needed to have your fields clean, and as soon as it rained, they would just be covered in water, and there was so much crap in the becks. I just got a machine in and I said, oh, blow this, we'll have to start tidying up as best we can, and that lambing time was very difficult. We lost a lot of lambs in dubs of water and things like that, and I had no buildings to speak of. It was very much an old-fashioned way of doing things, and a lambing shed would have been a real big help, but they weren't keen on spending that, really. They didn't want the valley to be spoiled, and I thought, well, there's two ways you can either look at this. You can either cut the sheep numbers down and go down the environmental road, and I was always against that, because I could see what was going on around with, we were losing a lot of sheep, and a lot of hefted flocks were going because of these schemes. And I mean, there's the reasons for the schemes are, there's various reasons for them, but once that sheep goes off a fell, it's reluctant to go back up.
Yeah.
Even if you're sending them away for winter. So there were just some decisions to be made, and the Hannah's family farm was sold in the 90s. So Hannah's had a similar story to me, really. She although her father did retain some land, she was wanting to have a go at farming since she'd met me, and I thought, well, we'll never get an opportunity like this again, and we tried to scrape, and I did a business plan in 2 days. We had a very limited time to make an offer for this land, and a limited time to try and find a mortgage. So I just sat down and drummed some figures out and sent it to the bank. And after a bit of deliberation, they would only give us the mortgage if my father-in-law guaranteed it.
Right.
So he had to put some of his savings to it to help us get this to get everything clarified. But we couldn't buy it all back. But at the finish, we got the buildings and 92 acres, I think.
Mm-hmm. What age will you be then?
I'd be in my late 30s. Yeah.
And there you go. So I said, inspiration, a podcast like this to lose the family farm at 17 and spend 20 years of your life just dreaming and working towards that, and eventually getting the chance to get back into one. So you then, so you're coming up, got a young family across Hawes, did you say? Is that the district? So a bit of a trek from where you are.
Yeah, I commuted from Patterdale to Hawes most days. So I would try and do a bit of work on the farm in Hawes at night and do my managing job during the day.
Okay.
Which was, the kids needed me to be here really to help Anna, and it was just we were overstretching ourselves, and I thought, well, I've got an opportunity here to find my own place now, and Richard had tenants. That was my father-in-law. He had tenants on the land that he had sort of retained, and he does a lot of dog trialing, and he does a sheepdog demo. He's done the sheepdog demo for nearly 40 years now.
Okay.
That was his way of diversifying and moving away from.
What's his surname, Richard?
Richard Fawcett.
Okay, right.
Yeah, if anybody who's been to Hawes will know about Richard Fawcett or have heard of him with his sheepdog demos.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And so he said, well, we can, if we join everything back up again, you'll have 200 acres. And I thought, well, that's brilliant. And so we eventually, bit by bit, we got it back together, and we managed to get some draft sheep bought, and we started breeding mules. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it was the good thing about the Lake District was that they let me buy some stock. So we bought. We will have spent 50,000 on mainly draft ewes, but we bought some heifers, semental heifers, and they came as at the same time as the sheep. And I was going to try and carry on the sementals if I could. So that it was nice. It was nice to take some stock away from there, thinking, well, I've got and at the same time they could lessen the numbers a bit.
Yeah, and that stock that you've bred, it's the devil you know, and things like that, isn't it? If you can take the animals that you've bred a few generations of, then you know what you're getting, and you pick the right ones, don't you?
Yeah, that's it. And they were really good Swaledale sheep for breeding mule gimmers. I tried a Leicester Tup up there, and it was they matched really well. They had good skins, and they'd got plenty of bone, and they did good carriage, and they were well bred sheep. Actually, the sheep in the lakes were one of the first sort of Swaledale flocks to get established there, so they would have done the job well over the years. They just needed sweetening up a bit, if you will.
We'll just go on a little bit about the Swaledales and give a bit of a history of the breed, because I did the history of quite a few breeds a couple of years ago, and I never got round to the Swales, and I probably owe them one, to be fair. And hey, Wayne Hutchinson, if you're listening there, we're gonna help you guys out with the Swales a little bit. There might be worth a few free photos from you at some stage, but this gives a little bit more about this. I know they went through a rocky time, didn't they, with the foot and mouth, cleared a lot of those foals, and it took them a while to get back on their feet. But you still breed pedigrees, you still breed pures, don't you?
Yes, we've cut them down. I've got to the stage here where I was putting 200 to the pure swale, and because we got chance of another lump of land as well while we were setting up here, so everything happened at once. We've since given it up because the economics of it weren't really working out. I still kept on with the Swaledales, and in the perfect area for it, really. It was we're surrounded by some great flocks that are still going strong. Maybe not as numerous as the breed was even after foot and mouth. There were still 10,000 ewes being sold through Hawes, draft ewes being sold through Hawes, and you'll do well to get 1,000 at a sale now. It's really, a lot of people don't sell drafts anymore. They sort of wear them out and cross them themselves. But back in the day, every big flock of sheep would have a drove of 200 or 300 draft ewes every year, and and all that's gone now. Barring a few flocks in the Lake District, perhaps would still be working towards that, but.
Been replaced, Andrew? The Swales been replaced by other breeds, by Tivits or Blackies or something, or they're just not there?
Yeah, possibly. Yeah, I think a lot of the foot and mouth, they would not want to restock with Swaledales because they were very expensive. Everybody was wanting the best genetics they could afford to buy with the money that they had from the compensation. Yeah, that's a
familiar story.
Yeah, and then. So a lot of white-faced sheep, a lot of Texel crosses, but Chivy has made an impact in the area. Maybe not as prolific, but easier. Easier. When I say not as prolific, more easy care. They're not maybe needing the inputs that the modern Swaledale has become very prolific and has needed. a lot of money spending on it.
Mm.
And
But you're still involved in that. Still a good trade for good tops, and you do a bit of showing. Do you show a few as well? Judge a bit, maybe. Is there any
yeah,
highlights?
yeah. Two highlights for me judging. I judge Muka Shaw with a lad, Tom Robinson from Cathlow Farm in the Trough of Bowland, Forest of Bowland, the farm that I actually brought some of my nucleus Swaledales from way back when I was in my early 20s. Okay. And so it was nice to judge with him on, at the Swaledale Royal, as it's known as. That was a big day for me. Yeah,
okay, good.
And I've judged the tups at Hawes as well, the Shealing Sale. I've judged the small breeders and the championship with Patrick Sowerby, who's another big name in the breed. Okay. Well, he's sort of retired out of it now, but he still has a sheep or two about. And but yeah, it's been good to people that I've looked up to. It's been good to be judging with them, and they can see the progression that you've made, and they trust your opinion. And
good.
Yeah.
Good. In the top of it, yeah. And you mentioned to me that you were a stratified flock. I hadn't heard of that. What does that entail?
Well, it's a stratification system of a sheep flock. It's basically a pure hill breed down to a terminal sire. Mm-hmm. So we've got a flock of sheep, a flock of Swaledales that are pedigree, and then we've a flock of Swaledales that are crossed with a Leicester, and then we sell the vast majority of the mule gimmers, but we keep a certain number back to replace to be replacements for the mules. We keep some mules. We have 50 mules, and then we have 50 Texel crosses. So the progression comes down from a Swaledale tup to a Beltex tup, if you will. So that it's like a stratified sheep system. So that you've the whole sheep system in one go.
Yeah. That's the way to do it. That's the way to see because you're seeing your end result as well as your beginning there, aren't you? So you've got both ends of the cherry there.
That's it, and you're not got all your eggs in one basket. We had 300 mule gimmers one year from here that we'd really done a good job of, and the prices weren't really good at all, and we got a bad draw. We were early on outside on a very wet day, and they came in looking dreadful, and this is the gamble you take. We're selling at a big sale like that, and we brought quite a lot home and kept some, and I thought, well, we'll try a few, and they really did well. They're a sheep for me that's always fit. The great mothers. I mean, the mule's a fantastic sheep. It's it still is in pole position, I think. And
backbone of the British sheep industry, without a doubt. And we did the same. I used to breed Welsh mules, and we did a similar thing at a bad draw one day, and just took all the sheep home, and then ended up farming those instead of farming the Beulahs that we were farming. So I understand how that is, and then you get to see and you get to use the animal, work with the animals that you bred for somebody else. But hey, this year, Chris, I don't know. You'll be a wheelbarrow to take your money to the bank after the sales this year. So you guys, you due a good turn, and you got one this time.
We only sold 70, but they averaged £171, and I've never ever hit the market average, or we're just above it. So I was really pleased. That was a big day for us to. I know we're working in less numbers. If I'd have had 300, then happy days. But as soon as the money comes in, it goes out. It's, There's no time to even smell it. Once it's gone, it's that's it. This is the way we're farming. I'm afraid.
Absolutely right.
It's still hand to mouth now. It's no different to what it was when we started.
Okay. Let's just move on. When we first got chatting there, you under the prefix of Hardrow Limousin. So, Limousin's obviously a breed close to your heart. You mentioned earlier on there. So I think you said you went to France originally and sort of picked up some ideas. So you're into the Limousins now. So how does that fit in? What sort of herd of Limousins do you run there alongside your sheep?
Well, we cut the sheep numbers down. We did some work with a consultant who said the cattle are actually doing better than your sheep are. I mean, things might be a bit different now. This is a few years ago, but he suggested we're just looking for ways to try and be more profitable, and he suggested cutting the sheep down and developing the cattle side of things. We started with, I've had involvement with Limousins for a while, but I got chance to buy a daughter of a cow that I once owned. with a heifer calf at foot, and from Will and Jill Sedgley. I'd got a good animal prior to that, prior to going to the Lake District, and I couldn't take her with me. They wouldn't let me take her with me, so Will and Gillian bought her off me, and I said she came from Millington Grange, John Wetherill. She was an object voyelle. She was an object embryo, and I thought I'll never have a better opportunity than to get this heifer. So I bought her, and obviously I got her in calf, and then I got a chance of this job, so I had to make some decisions. And I said to her, take her and do what you want with her. I hope she does everything for you. And they flushed her and got 10 embryos out of her. Okay. And then anyway, when I got Hardrow and I told them what I was thinking of doing, they said, "Oh well, you can have the first daughter that she was in calf to when she left my hands. You can have her back with a heifer calf at foot," and she's been the nucleus of starting off again, really. So that's been brilliant. It's like you set your eyes on something and have to say goodbye to it for a while. But I always knew where I would, if I ever got chance, that it would be a good starting point, and it worked out well. You knew where the genetics were, yeah. I mean, that's again is a common theme that we do hear on this. So you go back to what you know, and you go back to, and it's nice to get a chance to get that chance. And you went to France. I think you've had some influence. I think that's when we first got chatting. I'd just come back from France. I live in France, as you know, and you got into France and got influence from them, and obviously got in amongst the Limousins there. Yeah, that was it. We got on. I was in a farming discussion group, and they got some money to have a trip or several trips to France and Belgium, but I went on most of them. Mm-hmm. But the trip to Limoges was the one I was really looking forward to, and I wasn't disappointed. As soon as I landed, the plane was coming into Limoges airport, and you can see all these red cattle, and I thought, "Oh, this is going to be some trip." And we met Sophie Monitas, or as she was known then. She's got married now, but she took us round Lenard Station. Very able as she is, very able, and a good. It's someplace, Interim, someplace. Oh yeah, tremendous. Yeah, we dined in the restaurant, and a lot of the steaks weren't well done enough for the palate. I mean, I quite enjoyed eating it like it was, but there was a few people wanted the steaks more well done, But then we got a lot of herd visits planned around the Carrez and Haute-Vienne, and it got cut short because actually it snowed. We'd had about 10 centimetres of snow, and the coach couldn't get round half of these places. Oh. So we finished up going to some other places that weren't prepared to see us, if you will. But we saw some fantastic cattle, and the stockmanship, the docility of the animals was just incredible. I mean, you go to the store cattle sales, some of these, of any breed, some of them are climbing the walls to get out, and you look at the temperament of these animals, and they got a lot of stick in the UK for being, getting upset and flighty, but there was no evidence of that when we went round these herds in France. I was really surprised, and that was a light bulb moment for me. I thought, I want to be involved in this, and I want to get, to learn everything I need to learn about it, and the genetics, and hopefully, we've had this conversation on here that there's still a lot of good Limousin cattle left in France. Charolais maybe not quite so much. They took a lot of the. There's still good Charolais here too. Don't forget, but a lot of the cattle in Limousins in France are still here, and a lot of the breeders that we speak to will go back to France every 2 or 3 generations and buy another bull over here, and still people bringing in female. I was at the national show last year, and we had 500 Limousins there. I mean, there's still it's big business here. Barracouville, you went to Barracouville, okay. Mm-hmm. There is, and the same names, the same herds, they're still going strong, and generation after generation, and it's nice. I mean, I've yet to really get to know people I've met John Luke Cress recently, and I've talked with him, and there's Richard Bartle's offered to if I'm ever in France and he's ever there at the same time, it would, you know, take me around some farms and meet some people, which
Yeah,
is
Mark's got some good influence there. Mark Lewis as well. Got some
yeah.
good some people that know a lot of these people and will take you around to the. And I think when they know the breeders as well, you get an easier road in, don't you? When you get to talk to people there.
That's it. Yeah, I mean, we were there in October. I took my brother.
Mhm,
There was a sale in the central Limousin that John Luke Crest does, the All Rouge,
mhm, mhm.
Genetic Pro is involved. That's his sort of genetic side of things now. And I was
Yeah,
spoke to him
he's not
previously.
actually with it to him anymore, is he, John Luke? He's still
No,
on the
no.
fringes, but it's still everybody looks up to him.
Funnily enough, some friends of mine were on the plane from Skipton, the Mason family, Oddacres Limousins, and they've known and been involved in it for a long time, and I've got quite a bit of information off them. But there's a particular breeder that died a few years ago, Christophe Rochard, and I was sort of desperate to get into some of his genetics, and there was a few animals that this sale that I was looking at, and I knew I couldn't get this particular heifer home because of the, you know, various regulations and what have you. But John Luke said, if you are keen, and he said, get it bought, and then you know, they'll take it to show Breve and places like that next year, and you know, we'll get some embryos out of it. And
Yeah.
we nearly did it, but at the last minute, obviously the lumpy skin disease restrictions came in. I think, well, some of the cattle had actually set off to be at the show, and they turned round, and
Yeah,
we
yeah.
landed there in the Limoges, and the place was empty, you know. And
Hmm.
I thought, what a shame, you know. I'd
Yeah.
got a chance to,
Was a
you
shame.
know,
I was going to the big show in Claremont this year as well, and that one there they ended up having no cattle too. And
yeah.
no, it is a problem. Hopefully they'll get through it, but it is an issue. Just go on to your own herd. Then, what sort of numbers are you running there now with the Hardrow Limousin?
Yeah, we've got 15 registered females.
Uh-huh.
Cows down to sort of 8-month-old, 9-month-old sturks.
Mhm.
We've built up. We bought an odd female in, and then my brother-in-law, Hannah's younger brother, well, her only brother, he said he could see what we were trying to do, and he wanted to be involved. And he said, "Look, can I help and put some money in and get some bought?" And because he's works in the oil industry,
Mhm.
and he finished up buying quite a few pure heifers just to run as a commercial,
Okay.
to run some pedigrees alongside some commercial pures to try and try our genetics out on. And we went to buy a bull from the Hutton family, who I got to know very well when I was in the lakes.
Hmm. Yep. We're
Throughout
very well
Kent.
known. George was, of course, in the breed from the beginning. Doing well.
Yeah, I knew George, and I chatted to him at Tup Sales and what have you, and I was good friends with Phil and Tom, and I said, "Look, I want a bull off you," and we went. It was while George was still alive. It was the last sort of crop of
Hmm.
bulls he'd actually seen and had anything to do with, really. So it was nice to get one, and we got this French bred bull called, it was Auburn, but it was French bred on both sides. He was by a bull called Delicious, and he's been the sort of maternal sire that we've used to breed some good cows, or to
Yep.
and he's been the sort of base mark, and he seemed to click well with most things that he's been on. He's an easy carver. He's double F94L, which we're trying to stick to. And then I got a chance to buy a small pedigree herd out from Blackpool, Kirkview herd, Will Salisbury. He'd sold a few cattle in Bentham, and we bought one off him with a calf at foot. And he said, "Oh, I've got a few left at home, and they're really well bred things." He said, "I'll let you know when I'm thinking about moving them on." And he sent me the pedigrees, and they were all object neck, and I thought, wow, this is too good an opportunity to miss. And when I looked through the pedigrees, I mean, there's some tremendous breeding in there, all the way back to Uplands herd, and a lot of Broadmeadows genetics and a lot of French genetics, and they were just, well, these are perfect, and so we bought them as well, and they upped our numbers. So we're running 30. We're carving 25 this year, and then we've another a handful of heifers coming through that'll get AI'd, and then we'll try and keep retaining heifers as much as possible. I don't want to get to the stage where I can't feed them. That's the problem. Without having to spend money buying foraging, we have got some reasonable mowing ground that we cut twice, but cows can eat, and I don't want to get into the position of having to buy in a lot of forage for them. So we're just sort of hedging, seeing what we can manage really at the moment. But we run 30 females, and like I said, we'll be having 25. Yeah.
Showing a few of those, getting out about and showing them, and made sales with them.
We will be doing. We've had store cattle at the shown, not necessarily halter trained, although we have a young bull that's halter trained, and we've sold an odd heifer that we've had on the halter. But we're hoping to get into the mainstream this year, and go to Labour Show maybe with a bull that our own breeding Tango, which I've got a lot of faith in. He's very well bred, and he looks well, and he's maybe not everybody's cup of tea. He could be more muscly for people, but he's a French type, if you will. He's not carrying a vast amount of muscle, but he looks. Just
define for our listener. Sorry to interrupt you. Just define for our listener the French type. It is a slightly different type. I mean, a different type of animal, a little bit more sustainable, maybe not quite so big, a little bit more muscle about. Just do your principles run down that line the way the French breed them?
Yeah, I don't want calving issues.
Okay.
That's the first thing. We've tried to find a cow that fits the farm, and we have some wet ground, and it's floodplain, some of it. So, a cow that's sort of easily fleshed, and a medium-sized cow rather than some of these cows are big. I mean, some of the French cows are really big, aren't they? The sort of they're well proportioned. They're not carrying massive rumps out the cows. But they're just sweet, if you will, and naturally muscled and well balanced, and our sort of cows have got a smaller head, really. They're not, that's the object type. I think he had a smaller. That's what he tends to breed, and they're not as tall as some Limousins would be, but it's a bit like Swaledale sheep. There's several types of Swaledale sheep, and it's the same with Limousins, isn't it? You've got your more extreme types that are the Qs and the NTs and things like that, and in this country, and I wanted to try and keep as true to French type as I could.
Okay.
Yeah.
Rightly so. From what you've learned, that's fair enough, and absolutely right as far as I'm concerned. But hey, I'm not the man in the middle of that one. But and you've butchered a few of your own as well. I think you said it's a few local pubs. So you get on that end as well. I mean, that's really important, isn't it, to be able to see the finished product with animals and get a look at what you're breeding as well.
Yeah, our local butcher Davy Cockett in Hawes, he's very much a Limousin man in terms of what he puts in his shop. He doesn't want too big an animal, but his customers like things to be on the leaner side, which is is his choice. I mean, your Angus is coming into play now as you're the expert man with that. You've got more marbling and more fat, and I think it depends who you're catering for. I think if like you said in your French podcast, this is a girl who's watching won't eat a fatty steak if she's watching a figure and things like that.
It wasn't me that said that. It was Cedric, a Frenchman, who I thought I'm sure he was right.
Yeah, you understand what I mean, though. Without you end up trimming all this fat off, and he said, "Oh well, I'd rather." We'll have a go with your cattle, and so far it's worked really well. We've nothing ready just at the moment, but it's nice to see some finished products and eat some finished products. And
I think you said you supply the local pub as well, which is a good excuse to go down and try some as well. And the pub business isn't the easiest at the moment, but if they're getting your local product, that's brilliant to hear.
Yeah, the pub was taken over recently by a businessman who also owns the Tanhill Inn.
Okay.
And so he's working the two pubs together, and he came when he bought the place. He said, "Look, you're the local farm. It would be nice to get some of your stuff in." And he got Davey on board with the butchering side of things, and I mean, we've not at the moment. He's Davey's not got anything of ours because we've nothing ready, but he is trying to. When we have got stuff, he'll put it through the pub. Yeah.
Give the pub a shout out, Andrew. Which pub is that? Is that in Hawes, is it?
No, it's the Green Dragon Inn in Hardrow.
Okay. Okay. Paid a visit one other day for the steaks there. It's great to chat to you and see how that's sort of the whole end to end that you've got and the ideas you got about it. I'm going to steal a question here from Wallace Curry from his podcast on this one. Is what advice would you give to you? What advice would you given to your younger self really when you got started there with this dream?
Yeah. You're gonna make mistakes, and you have to learn by your mistakes. I think you're never going to get things right. You will think, when you're short of money as well, you tend to make rash decisions, and sometimes you can weigh things up and do things easier. If but you've got to be determined, and I mean, even now I've got a part-time job, 20 hours a week. I'm going doing painting and decorating and things, just to keep the money coming in. Even now, we're not out of the financially. It's we've lost.
And Hannah works in the market, I think, does she?
Yeah, she does. Yeah, and she's a farming advisor for the national park, the Dales National Park.
Okay.
She deals with schemes and things.
A lot of youngsters do listen to this, and I mean, it's one of the reasons I was keen to speak to you. Really, was the inspiration that to have it taken away from you at a young age, at the farm taken away from you, but still keeping that dream together and pulling it back together. And I mean, inspiration to youngsters here. And what do you tell them? To never give up, I suppose.
Yeah, and I'll mention I've had some people who've helped me out tremendously. Mm-hmm. Whether it's been people I've worked for or, have lent me a few quid when I've needed it. I had one particular boss who let me graze his brother's farm for, it was a small farm, but he said, right, put your sheep on here for a bit, and it just things like that make a hell of a difference, and they give you a chance to get a foothold. And
don't be frightened to ask, is that?
Yeah, that's it. And if they know you're keen and they know you're committed, they'll, 9 times out of 10, they're very helpful. I mean, I milked cows for a guy once, and he said, oh, if you want a calf, he said you can have one cheap, that sort of thing. And you think it's things like that say, oh well, I've got a starter here. Mm-hmm. That's what you need is just, and I think the further farming goes down this line of who's going to succeed or who's going to take over, or is that. There are opportunities coming.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I think that there will be a lot of older people giving up the farms for a number of reasons. Obviously, the IHT that you mentioned there, and maybe they just don't have the people to pass it down to. Some of these farms will be coming up and available, and the opportunities are there. I mean, I know money's expensive, but they are. And there's organisations as well, I suppose. I mean, you've got the young Limousin breeders that I know within the Limousins, and the Angus have theirs as well. I mean, again, for these youngsters, there's places to go and learn this stuff, isn't there?
There is, yeah. And you'll learn by spending time with the breeder. Just if they can pass the knowledge. It's like Matt and Craig Ridley. I've been up there a few times over the years, and. They'll give you advice. They said, Matt Ridley, he'd say to you, well, think about your cow families, concentrate on that. That's the most important thing. And he said, keep your females right. And then he said, everything will fit into place. And, that's little bits of advice, take it on board. And,
wise words beyond the grave there. Yeah, absolutely right. And great man, Matt Ridley was. And great legacies left behind there as well, and fantastic stock breeders, not just the Limousins, but of all sorts of things. Just a man, just able people, but happy to help you.
Yeah, and that's there's some great people, there's some great characters, and anybody that's coming into the job, get to know them. One thing about these the Limmy job, the Swaledale job, or all these jobs is that there's a lot of youth and enthusiasm. It's very rich in it, and particularly in our area, there's loads of young kids who are mad keen, and they'll get a lift up if they keep it up. They'll get a chance to rent bits of land here and there, and that's it. I mean, there's nothing like having your own stuff.
No.
It's a great feeling.
And you've got a young family. I know they're still young now, but you encourage them to go into the farm after yourself?
Well, I've got 2 stepchildren. Kit, our 20-year-old son, he's in Thailand at the moment traveling.
Okay.
I think he'll go to university. That's the plan, but he's enjoying himself at the moment. And Annie, our daughter, she's just left school and she's finding her feet a bit. She's not really sure what she wants to do, but she's a clever girl. I'm sure she'll be all right. Yeah, and young Patrick, who's he's 10. He's been, like I say, he's been farming since he was, in the pram, and he's got a Beltex flock of his own. He's got a handful of sheep, and he's breeding some nice fat lambs, and he's also got a Swaledale tupper too, and that he's had to ewes we've given him over the years, and.
Great to encourage them when they're young, and if you give him a few sheep, and if he doesn't go into the business, they've always got something to sell later on. No, that's brilliant to hear that they are coming through. He sounds mad keen. I'm sure he's a name we'll look out for in future.
He's very scientific. If I can put some of that scientific brain into the breeding animals, we'll be unstoppable.
There you go.
But he's won first prizes at Tanhill Show with his tubs and things like that. So he's seen it. To get a ticket at a show is a big thing, and if you do it when you're young, it keeps you. Keeps you keen.
That taste of success, you're right. So once you taste it, you never want to be without it. Andrew, it's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you. As I said, we chatted the other day, and just as I said about inspiration of what you've been through and what you've done. But it's great to hear as well the depth of knowledge that you have, and obviously sharing some of that back into the industry. So absolutely fabulous to have you on Top Lines and Tales.
Thank you. I'll just mention our American contingency. There was a Robin and Keith Shannon. They moved to the village from Pennsylvania, and they showed an interest in. They helped us lambing one year, and they've showed a big interest in the farm with an idea that they want to farm themselves. And I've always thought if I'm in a position where I can help somebody else, I will do. They've invested in a cow or two as well, so they've joined the Limousin team.
Okay.
So we call it Team Tango. So I'll give them a shout out and thank them for the support.
Excellent. Well, I didn't get to the Yorkshire show this year, but I'm sure you guys all have a day out down there as well. But maybe next year or this year coming now, we'll maybe get back there and see you all about there. Maybe. Yeah, Andrew, thanks very much for your time. It's been superb to speak to you.
Thank you very much.
Cheers. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Top Lines and Tales podcast. And as always, we'd like to thank our sponsors and partners, Hardrow, for their continued support. And don't forget, at the moment when we're just ahead of lambing, speak to Hardrow about their ewe feed. Their Premium 18 is the market-leading ewe feed packed full of energy and fibre and quality protein. Not only will it keep your ewes in tip-top condition, but it also makes sure colostrum is full of goodness to get those lambs off to the best start. So Hardrow are renowned not only for their good stuff in their feed, but also what doesn't go in. No nasty palm kernels in here. So speak to the Hardrow team and find out more information about that and about their other range of products. Speak to your local representative or look up Hardrow on the internet. And while you're there on the internet, don't forget to join our Top Lines and Tales Facebook community, where you'll find some photographs about this week's podcast and previous podcasts.